All right, crew, listen up. We're going to proceed north and then west. And west. When we get to the archipelago, west.
Captain, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this, and we are a submarine, a nuclear submarine. We are silent. We are killers.
Right.
And so are they. So my question is, why are we telling the enemy where we're going?
We're not telling the enemy, but we are making sure the crew is all on board. You don't want to get lost in the ocean?
Sure. No, I get that, but I don't know if you're aware of this. Our radios are on. Everything that you say, they can hear, because I'm assuming they have someone like me who's listening to the radio frequencies, because they're doing the same thing.
Right.
And I almost know where they are. I'm really close.
So they might know where we are.
Yeah.
If we do the same.
Yeah. So,
okay.
My thought, if it's okay,
sure,
is what if we didn't do that? Like, what if we were just silent? Like, we just went where we're going?
Silent, sneaky, we don't announce our position or anything.
Yeah. Does it sound good?
You know, I don't necessarily enjoy pulling rank here like you've been doing, but I am open to good suggestions. Let's all try being really quiet.
Captain, torpedo on its way straight to us. Please, no one move. We're not allowed to move.
Right, this rules of engagement, and also it's quiet time, practice.
Did you see the new Avengers?
No, I haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it.
So good.
Hey folks, my name is Shay and this is RTFM, the show where I teach you how to play a game, because games are cool, and you're pretty cool for playing them. But I have a question for you. Do you remember Battleship? You know, that game where you fire blindly into the ocean, trying to hit your opponent's cleverly placed ships? If so, you probably had the same thought that I did while playing that game, which is, don't boats usually move? Well, here comes Captain Sonar bringing you exactly what you had forgotten you wanted from Battleship. In this game, you will be playing as two opposing submarine crews who are trying to find and destroy each other without being found yourself. Each player will have a different job on the boat working together, but performing completely different actions. Your team will win if the other submarine takes 4 points of damage, and I'm sure this all sounds simple enough, but there's one last thing. Now, you don't have to, but if you feel up to it, you can play this game in real time, meaning both teams are taking their turns simultaneously. And this is one of the most raucous, exhilarating, insane gaming experiences out there, and we're about to learn how to play it. First thing to do is divide yourself into teams. This game plays up to 8, so that means you can have 2 teams of 4 with each person playing a different role. Of course, you can also play with 3 people on a team, or 2, or if you really want to challenge, just 1. Once you have your team sorted out, put up the dividers between you. Oh, and if you have 8 players, having a long table is really going to help you out. Then choose which map you're going to play. There are 5 in the base game, and whether you're playing turn by turn or in real time. Now, each player board has a different side for each of the 2 game modes, and let's say we're playing in real time, but I'll let you know whenever the rules are different between the 2 modes. After that, give everyone the materials that they need for their job, name your submarine something stupid, and after each captain secretly chooses their team's starting location, they look at each other, yell dive, and the game begins. So, you want to hunt down a submarine? Well, you're going to need a good crew to do it. So let's talk about how to operate each station, starting with the captain. Now, your job is to move the boat around the map and activate each of the systems you have available to you. Whenever you move, loudly state the direction you go, north, south, east, or west, and then wait for your first mate and engineer to say okay after they do their jobs. Then you can move again. As you move around, you'll also be marking your path on the captain's map. You move 1 space at a time, and you can't move into an island or cross your own path. And that's pretty much all the captain does mechanically, but you're also in charge of setting the strategy for your team, as well as anticipating the moves of your enemy. And as for those special abilities I mentioned, well, I'll talk about how they work a little bit later. The next job to look at is the radio operator. Now, your job is to listen to the other team's captain and try to figure out where they are. You'll do so by taking this clear plastic sheet, holding it over your map, and drawing lines based on what their captain says. You won't know where they started at first, but by moving your sheet around the map, you'll be able to narrow down the options, and eventually you should be able to pinpoint their location. Some of the extra abilities will make things easier or harder for you, so it's also a good idea to keep notes as well. Next, we have the first mate. Your job is to charge up each of the special systems. You've got torpedoes, mines, drones, sonar, silence, and scenario. The scenario system is dependent on the map you're using, and not all maps will have them. The map we chose doesn't, but if yours does, the details for how the system works will be written on the back of the rulebook. And charging these systems couldn't be simpler. Every time your captain announces a move, mark one space on any one gauge on your board. Once you've done so, tell your captain OK so they can continue. If you fill the last space on the gauge, you have to announce it, in this case by saying mine ready. Then, whenever that system gets activated, you erase each of the marks on the gauge. The captain can activate any system, but the first mate is also allowed to activate drones and sonar if they want to. You're also in charge of marking the damage that your sub has taken. Hopefully it won't be a lot. And lastly, we have the engineer. This board might look a little complicated, and it takes a minute to get used to, but the basics of it are nice and simple. Whenever the captain announces a direction, let's say north, put a mark on a symbol in the section corresponding to that direction, then say OK so that the captain can continue. The symbols represent the three groups of systems: mines and torpedoes in red, drones and sonar in green, and silence and special in yellow. These submarines are old and rickety, and even the slightest strain makes them break down, so whenever there's a mark on even one of these symbols, none of the corresponding systems can be activated. And there's also a fourth symbol, which doesn't correspond to any system, but if each of these radiation symbols gets marked, your submarine will take 1 damage. Your sub will also take a damage if each symbol on one of the directional boxes gets marked. In either case, you must announce that your ship has taken damage, but then you get to erase all breakdowns from your board. Now, you can't fix damage once you've taken it, but these systems can be repaired in a couple of different ways before they sink your boat. First is the self-repair function. Now, you'll notice that some of these symbols are connected to each other. These are self-repairing systems, so if you can fill up each one, they'll automatically repair themselves, and you can erase each of those marks. The systems that aren't self-repairing can only be fixed by surfacing, which leads me to... There are a number of different abilities that the captain has at their disposal. Most of them have to do with systems, but since I mentioned it a second ago, let's talk about surfacing first. It goes like this. The captain yells surface, and then declares the sector that they're in. That'll be the big number on the map. After that, if you're playing turn by turn, the other team gets to take 3 turns in a row before your team can take their next turn. But if you're playing in real time, things are a little bit trickier. Now, you may have noticed this blueprint here. Well, in order to repair your systems, each crew member will need to draw a line around one section without drawing outside the white outline, just like those games you played when you were a kid. Now, once you've done that, initial the section and hand it to the next crew member. Now, if you have fewer than 4 crew members, or if one of your players is physically incapable of performing this, you might have to do this multiple times until each section is complete. After which, your engineer hands the board to the enemy engineer for inspection. And if you've successfully stayed within the lines, your engineer gets to erase all the breakdowns on the board and says, ready to dive. After this, your captain can erase your old path, then say dive and resume captaining. If not, the enemy engineer points out which sections weren't repaired, and whoever was responsible has to redo it until it's right. Now, let's talk about the systems. Before activating anything, make sure you actually can by checking with your engineer. Remember, if any of the symbols corresponding to the system are crossed out, you can't do it. Now, if you're all in the clear, yell stop, and make sure everyone on both teams puts their pens down before announcing what you're doing. After your action resolves, both teams will continue as normal. On the offensive side, we have mines and torpedoes. When you drop a mine, choose a location adjacent to where your ship currently is and write M on your map. At any point after this, you can then detonate the mine, at which point you'll announce the mine's exact location. If any sub is on that space, they'll take 2 damage. If they're adjacent to that space, either diagonally or orthogonally, then they'll only take 1 damage. Now, torpedoes are more immediate. When you launch a torpedo, announce a point between 1 and 4 spaces away from you for the torpedo to strike, and you have to be able to draw a path to this point without passing through an island. As with mines, these will do 1 or 2 damage depending on how accurate you were. Torpedoes can also hurt you and destroy your own mines, so be careful with them. After a torpedo or mine detonation, the other captain will say either all clear if they weren't damaged, indirect hit if they took 1 damage, or direct hit if they took 2. Now let's look at the detection systems, drones and sonar. These are pretty easy. When you launch a drone, choose a sector and ask the enemy captain if they're in it. So like, are you in sector 4? After which they must truthfully tell you yes or no. When you activate sonar, the enemy captain gives you 2 pieces of information about their location. These can be the current row, column, or sector. Now, one of these things will be true, and the other will be a lie. In this case, we might say we're in Sector 4, which is true, and Row 10, which is false. And now for the sneakiest system of all, silence. When you activate silence, your captain can move up to 4 spaces in a straight line, again, without crossing islands or your own path. But the trick here is that you don't have to announce the direction to the other team. Let your teammates know where you're going, either by showing them your map or just pointing in directions, north, south, or whatever. And then the engineer and first mate will mark 1 space on their boards. And lastly, we have Scenario. In the base game, there's only 1 map with scenario abilities, but there are expansions with more. In each case, a section in the rulebook will tell you how it works, and unless it says otherwise, you can assume that it'll follow all other system-related rules. And that's how you play Captain Sonar. If you need to rewatch something, as always, there are annotated links in the description box below. Thank you to my rules lawyers for voting on this game. If you want to help decide what games I teach, join the Patreon and you'll get access to the polls, and pretty soon even be able to suggest what games I do next. And even though the current poll isn't actually finished at the time of filming this, I am entirely certain that the next game I teach will be Gloomhaven. It's heavy. I also want to give a big thanks to the brothers Murph for helping me out with this one and that green screen bit at the beginning. There's some cool dudes who have their own channel that you should all check out. It is unsurprisingly named The Brothers Murph, and link in the description box as well. They're great, and they are my actual neighbors, so hopefully we'll get to work with each other again soon. I think that's all the YouTube promotion BS that I need to do, and I don't want to waste any more of your time, so bye!